Nadam se da me čujete. Evo.
I hope you can hear me. Yes, you can. So, coffee break is over. Please be seated so that we can continue. Before the lunch break, we have this great honor to hear our Swedish guests, Nora Sandholdt. She has been working in the Association Spinalis. She's one of the initiators of the Mama Papa Lan project. This is a project dealing with parenthood and fertility and motherhood of persons with spinal cord injuries. She's very active in providing assistance to parents. She has graduated from MBA. She has worked as an analyst and as a consultant. In 1991, she had a car accident during which she had a SCI accident and injury. She's also a mother of 2 daughters. We also have here Erika Nilsson, who works as a project coordinator at the Spinalis NGO. She does research studies and develops rehabilitation and care for persons with SCI. She intensely cooperates with professionals in the field of fertility, reproductive health of persons with SCI. Erika had a horse riding accident during which, when she obtained actually this SCI injury, she's also a mother of 2 sons. Please, let's give a big welcome and big applause for our dear guests. And now I would like to invite our guest, who is not on the agenda, but we love him dearly. This is the Swedish ambassador, Mr. Lars Smith, who is going to introduce and greet our Swedish speakers.
Morning. Dobry utro. It's perhaps too late to say good morning, but anyway, I'm happy to be here to support this exchange of very important experiences on this matter. So thank you, Roda, for making Sweden a partner of this. It's an honor to us. And thank you, Nora and Erika. Tack for coming here. Many visitors to this country comes back, so trust me, you will be here again. It's really also important to discuss this subject. It's a very important subject to make women and mothers with disability able to get that assistance and real assistance. So for Sweden, it's a key project. Education is one very important aspect, and I think that's what you will also tackle between the patients and especially the healthcare system. So that's perhaps a takeaway from a Croatian point of view as well. But most of all, it's to share experiences and to create circumstances and equal opportunities to each and everyone. That's my key message. I will not take and steal more time from your important presentation, so I hope that you will enlighten this audience and let 1,000 flowers blossom. Thank you. Good luck.
Hello. This is working? Yes. Thank you very much for that nice introduction of you, Branka, and Mr. Ambassador Lars Schmidt. We are very happy and honored to have been invited here. It's my first time in Croatia, and as I said, I already want to come back and see more. And yes, my name is Erika Nilsson, and I am here today together with Nora Sandholdt to speak about a topic for women with spinal cord injuries, fertility, pregnancy, birth, and breastfeeding.
Yes, and I am Nora Sandholdt. And I've been working with Erika on this project for the past 5 years. Yeah. We actually have 2 presentations today. This morning presentation, we will talk about our project, Mama Papa Lan, how we've been working with it. A little bit about the Swedish context, living with disability in Sweden, and kind of how the system works there. And then we're going to go more into the medical aspects of fertility, pregnancy, childbirth, and breastfeeding with a spinal cord injury. Does that sound good? Good. So I have not always been paralyzed. I was in a car accident in 1991 when I was 11 years old. I broke my spine and had a spinal cord injury about this level, so right underneath chest level. I was actually going with my parents to the Czech Republic to visit my grandparents, and it was one of those times when I was like all kids. I couldn't fall asleep in the car. It was boring to sit still. And at the end, my mom said, "Okay, Nora, take off your seatbelt and lay down on the back seat and see if you can fall asleep." My dad was driving, and on the Autobahn in Germany, we had a flat tire, and my father lost control of the car, and it was actually not a big accident, but as I didn't wear a seatbelt, I was, well, tumbled around in the back seat and broke my spine. When I got to the hospital, I remember a doctor coming to me telling me that you've had a spinal cord injury, Nora. You will probably not be able to walk again. And I thought, so, wheelchair, how bad can that be? I just want to go home. I don't want to stay here in the hospital. And that attitude has somehow been with me in my entire life. The wheelchair shouldn't be a boundary. I can do pretty much everything that I want to, although I use a wheelchair. I was 11 years old. I know that a doctor came to me at some stage telling me that I am just as fertile as I was before, that I will be able to have children, but he told me that in the sense of, remember, you're just as fertile as every other woman. Use contraceptives. And this is definitely the right information to give to a 12-year-old or 11-year-old. It's the right information to give to a 16, 17, 18-year-old. But as I was living with my spinal cord injury, when I was 25, and had been living in a relationship with my boyfriend for the past 5 years, then it would have been right to give me further information. Okay, so if I actually wanted to become a mother, what would that mean with my spinal cord injury? How will that affect my body? And I remember that I started asking about those questions at about when I was 25, 26, 27. Then it was a lot harder to actually find information on how that would work. And I had a lot of thoughts about how would that affect my body, and would I be able to be an independent mother, taking care of my child myself, or would my husband need to support me a lot? Yes.
Okay. Few words about myself. And I had my accident when I was 24. I had been living in Germany for a couple of years and had just come back to Sweden for summer holidays in 1994. And I was really into horse riding when I was young. I used to go to the riding school, and there was my big interest. But I sort of gave it up when I was a teenager. But then again, being 20 years plus, I started riding again. So this time in the summer when I was home, I asked some friends if I could have a lend of one of their horses, and I was out riding in the bush, and everything was fine until suddenly I felt my horse it was really strange. He sort of ran off with me, but it was up a hill, so I wasn't really nervous because I thought he'll get tired. But what I wasn't prepared for was that he suddenly threw himself into the wood, to the forest, and there was a tree and a branch, and I flew off the horse and I landed on my head. And I remember very well, a few seconds later, I woke up and I was looking around me, and I could hear the horse in the background, and I was looking down on my body, and my legs were in a funny position. and there were mosquitoes on my stomach, and I'm like, something serious. I sort of realized this is not good. This is something serious that had happened. But this was before, you know, no mobile phones or anything, and I was on my own. But luckily the horse ran back to the farm, and they could see the horse coming running, you know, with no person on top. And I had told them in what direction I was going to go riding that night. So they found me within an hour or so. And they were clever enough not to really touch me. The first thing I wanted was for them to sit me up. I said, help me up. But they said, no, we better leave you. And one of the persons got on their horse and got down to the little village and called for an ambulance. So what followed was almost 6 months in hospital. I had broken my neck at a low level for being a neck, the lowest neck fracture you can have. And a new life sort of started. I had my fiancé. He was living overseas, and he came to Sweden, and we sort of had to change plans for life altogether. But I went to the university and studied for a couple of years in media and communications, and we sort of settled into a new life. And I moved to Stockholm, and I got a good job at a rehabilitation center where there was also a lot of research and studying going on. So I was engaged, and I hadn't really planned to become a mother, but I always wanted kids. I have 3 younger, 2 sisters and a brother. So when I realized I was pregnant, I was happy, but I was also sort of terrified. For the same reasons as Nora, what will this really mean, and how am I going to be able to be a good parent, a good mum? But luckily I had a place in Stockholm where I could turn, a professional midwife who actually written her PhD thesis on women with spinal cord injuries and pregnancy, so I was in good hands. And I have 2 sons now, and the oldest one is turning 18, and the little one is 14. And I work as a project coordinator at Spinalis. And working at Spinalis, which is a rehabilitation center for, take the next, a rehabilitation center for people with spinal cord injuries in Stockholm, one thing that I realized is that there are so many more men than women that have spinal cord injuries. It's because it's a lot of traffic accidents, motorbikes, and it has been young men doing a little bit of crazy things very often, you know, falling down, doing things, even though we have now many more older men and women too. Anyhow, I saw that the men seemed to be able to find peer support and other people to talk to very much through sports, whereas the women lacked a platform to meet and to discuss things that you have in common. Not that you automatically have everything in common just because you have a spinal cord injury, but there are questions around everything from your body, urology, being in a wheelchair, having a family, and especially this with having with becoming pregnant. That is important for a lot of women. So I started get-togethers, ladies' nights, or women's nights for women with spinal cord injury, and I did this almost 10 years ago. And it was on one of these nights when we had the topic fertility, pregnancy, that I got to know Nora, because she actually she signed up for the night, and she said, I am very interested. I have a long list of questions because I am pregnant at the moment.
Yes, Erika, I got to know Erika a couple of years earlier, and Erika has kind of been one of my important role models. I had a lot of thoughts about becoming pregnant, and asked around, couldn't really get much answers, and eventually I got pregnant, and then I thought, okay, now all the answers will come. But when I went to the midwife's office the first time, I had this long list of questions, and I started asking the questions, and the midwife smiled and said, don't worry about that. Oh, don't worry about that. We'll take the complications as they come. And it became quite apparent during this visit that she didn't really know what she was talking about. She was just answering the answers that she thought that I wanted. And I didn't feel secure at all. When I came to the last question, it was, so I'm pregnant, this baby will need to come out at some stage. Do I need to have a C-section, or do you think that I can give birth vaginally? And she looked at me and said, don't worry about that. We normally plan the labor at week 36 out of a 40-week-long pregnancy. And I thought, oh my God, no, this is not possible. I need to find someone who can actually answer my questions. So that was the background to when I came to this first woman get-together at Spinalis. I had this long list of questions, and I asked those questions. I saw other mothers that had actually done this journey, and suddenly I started to feel a lot more secure. I also got the tip to take contact with an obstetrician in southern Stockholm who had specialized in women with spinal cord injuries. And I set up a meeting there. I came there with the same list of questions. And I started asking those questions. She could answer some of them. Some of them she said, I haven't really thought about that. I'll come back to you on that question. Or I am going to a conference in a couple of weeks. I'll talk about this topic with my colleagues from Spain and Italy. And although she couldn't answer all the questions, I felt that she knew what she was talking about. And at some stage during this talk, she interrupted me and said, Nora, I want you to be aware of that I've only been at the delivery of about 15 babies who had mothers with spinal cord injuries. I haven't met a lot. And my thought was, wow, 15 babies, that's a huge amount. This will all go well. And I could relax and feel secure during my pregnancy. But I still had the urge to see other mothers who were independent with their children, see other parents who were independent with their children. And I know that I even stopped a woman in Stockholm who was out in the city with her baby in her lap, just to ask her some questions about how she managed to do things. I had a meeting with Erica, giving her a long interview on how she managed to do different things. And I, for the first time since I had my spinal cord injury 20 years earlier, I really felt the urge to meet others, to have role models in this new situation. I knew very well how I would get around with my wheelchair, with my body, and how I could kind of take care of myself. But when it came to taking care of another person, that was a completely new situation for me. So in 2010, I had my daughter Ida. Here she is, newborn. Today she's going to school. And when she was not even 2 months old, we moved from Stockholm to southern Sweden, to Malmö. And there I got stopped when I was walking in town. And I was stopped by another woman with a little baby on her lap. I was stopped by Anna. I call her my first and only stalker, because she was a mother with a spinal cord injury living in Malmö who had never met another woman with a spinal cord injury and a baby. And she had the same urge that I have had to meet others. And we started meeting up, having coffee now and then, sharing experiences, talking about how our pregnancies had been, sharing advice on how to lift our babies from the floor, how we solved different things. And we had a lot of things, although Anne and I are really different persons, we felt that we have a lot of things in common, and we felt kind of stronger by meeting each other. And as we were speaking, we thought that we've had so much in common. The next woman who is thinking about having a baby shouldn't feel as insecure as we did. we should do something about this. So we started talking about starting a blog or kind of spreading some kind of information online. And when we were talking about this, we thought maybe we can find some kind of finance somehow. And I, again, turned to my role model, Erika, who I knew was working at the Spinalis Foundation, telling her about our ideas.
And I thought it was a great idea to sort of spread the word, to encourage women to also work on raising the medical knowledge for health professionals within this field, because there was a lot of knowledge in Stockholm, but Sweden is a very big country, not with the people living very far from the big cities. So we thought about something, how could we gather this information at one place? So we wrote an application, and in Sweden we have something called the National Inheritance Fund, where a lot of money goes from people who have no relatives. So we applied for a 3-year project on parenting and disabilities, and in particular having a spinal cord injury and becoming a parent. And we got the financing.
Apparently the Swedish Inheritance Fund thought that we had a good idea, not just us. So we actually got finance for a 3-year project to work with this. If we just briefly talk a little bit about Sweden, we feel kind of happy to be living in Sweden with the disability, because we have a good disability policy. We get our wheelchairs for free, and we can get our car adapted so we can actually drive a car. I wouldn't say that there aren't barriers to get into work life when you have a disability, but a lot of people with disabilities in Sweden do work.
We have a good healthcare system that looks after people, and I mean, you don't want to have a spinal cord injury, but if somewhere Sweden is a place where you at least have good healthcare system and you get your disability advice, you get help to have a car and even home adaptation. And also when it comes to parenting, I think that Sweden is a good place to be a parent, because as you might know, we have a very generous parental leave system where you have 480 days of paid parental leave in Sweden. And I think also we are a good country when it comes to equal opportunities between men and women, where also you see a lot of fathers staying home on parental leave with their children. At least there's 2 months of the parental leave that is sort of for the man exclusively.
Also, if you have a disability that is kind of that difficult that you can't live independently, you have the possibility to get assistance, so you can have an assistant that helps you. And all of those things together makes Sweden quite a good country. But on the other hand, the system hasn't really thought of the possibility that you can be a parent and have a disability. So, for example, you can't apply for assistance to be able to be an independent parent, for example. In Sweden, we also have high access to the internet. A lot of people, or 93% of the Swedish population, has access to the internet. And we do search online for information.
I think it's the same all over. As Branka mentioned in her presentation earlier, I think it was 69% that go online first thing. When you look for information, you don't go to the library any longer, you Google it. And that's where you start looking for information. So in our application, we also mentioned Article 23 in the Convention of Rights for Persons with Disabilities, which you mentioned earlier too, where it clearly states that even persons with disabilities should have the full right of marriage and also to have any number of children. And they also state that it's very important to have access to to information and access to reproductive and family planning education. So we brought this along too in our application for money, for money for this project.
So we decided to make a project with the goals to gather information on fertility, pregnancy, childbirth, and parenting for people with spinal cord injuries. And we decided to focus on the group people with spinal cord injuries because when it comes to the medical aspects, there are so many different diagnoses, so we can't include all disabilities. But when it comes to the parenting part, that is the same or similar, independently on what physical disability you have. We wanted to disseminate the information to people with spinal cord injuries and relevant healthcare professionals. So we've been traveling pretty much all around Sweden, giving lectures to people with spinal cord injuries, but also to midwives, obstetricians, and people working at rehabilitation wards about those questions. We want to strengthen, inspire parents and/or parents-to-be with disabilities, and thereby also support their children. And this is...
Yeah, I'm just saying that what we really wanted was for persons with spinal cord injuries to be able to make the decision on whether to become a parent or not based on what is medical or evidence, not assumptions on, no, this probably won't work, or I've never seen anyone else. We wanted them to make it the information accessible so they could make the decision based on facts.
And another important part is that we want people that are parent or are thinking of becoming parents to meet each other, to have role models, to see that they're not the only person in this country who's a parent with a spinal cord injury or in a wheelchair. So another aspect was to facilitate encounters amongst those people.
Pretty much because we know ourselves how important peer support is. To talk to someone who's been in the same situation is totally different than meeting a midwife saying, no, you will all be fine and this is great too. But you can't really beat someone else who's been there, done that, saying, yes, it is hard going, but you will work it out, you can do this or that. So peer support is extremely important, I think. So what did we do? We set up a website with the medical information that we spoke about. We have also started like a parental network online. We use Facebook. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. We have had family get-togethers, and we also, together with a big Swedish disability organization, have been involved in family camps in summer where families where mom or dad has a disability can come for 1 weekend at a totally accessible place by the sea and do fun things together.
Neither Erica or I are medical experts, but all the information that we've gathered, we have had checked by midwives and an obstetrician and a rehabilitation doctor. So everything has been checked by medical expertise. We thought we'd just give you a short look at the website, saiparenting.com. Has any one of you actually seen the website already?
Yes. And to say this, the part that we translated into English is really a small part of the Swedish site, but we got some funding to do translation on the medical bits, whereas the Swedish site also has a lot of blogs and parents writing in Swedish. But this, oh, it's not showing.
It's not showing?
What was the magic trick? There it is. So this is just for you to look into later. We have sort of also gathered some questions that we often got, and there's information under each of these tabs.
So you can, for example, go into pregnancy and read pretty much all the medical information that Eric and I will talk about later and more. And you find it here. There's also frequently asked questions and some practical aspects. On the Swedish website, we've also, as Erika said, had blogs of parents with spinal cord injuries, just to give the everyday life aspect on what to kind of expect of everyday life with children and disability, on what challenges you meet, and because sometimes you think that things will be challenging and hard, and those aren't problems at all, but other little things can be a lot more challenging. So just to give an everyday life perspective.
It's my tummy. Yes. Det ser inte så bra ut. Okay, now we've got a different view here. You can still see it. Just a few words. We're not here to talk about spinal cord injury, but I think most people, when they hear that you have been paralyzed, they think about you can't walk, you can't move. That's number one, and maybe also that you lack of sensation. But unfortunately, there's a lot of other things that sort of comes with a package, like neurogenic bowel and bladder, not being able to control your bowel and bladder like you did earlier, or a thing like spasticity, that you have muscle spasms in your legs or stomach. Pain, unfortunately, a lot of people have nerve pain, and that's a big problem for many. I think it's like 40–50% that suffer from really bad nerve pain after spinal cord injury. Sexual dysfunction, mainly most people think then about men who get problem with erectile dysfunction, but also when it comes to fertility, problem with ejaculation and lower sperm count, and not as good quality for the men. But also for women, when you have lack of sensation, it changes the situation, and it takes time to find your way back again. Breath and lung capacity, depending on what level injury you have. As I said before, I landed on my head and I broke my neck, and my level of injury is exactly within the green and purple area. I have a C7, C8, so I have a little bit less sensation. I don't have full finger. I have good finger movement, but I have not normal sensation, and I can't move anything from above here. And that also then affects my breathing and lungs, because I lack all those little muscles that you have when you cough and when I get like a
Erica has the cutest sneeze on earth.
When I sneeze, it sounds because I don't really. But that makes it's a big problem when you get a cold or a cough, and I need to be able to. If I get something stuck here in my throat, I'll have to really throw myself forward to be able to get some push. And also when you're pregnant and the baby is growing, it can affect your breathing capacity. For me it was fine, but I know I could feel the contractions almost on my breathing. So there are what we want to say is there's quite a few other things that comes with the spinal cord injury that also adds to the pregnancy.
Also, autonomic dysreflexia is kind of this, what happens in the body when you have a spinal cord injury. If you have a injury above T6, which is about mid of the green part here, you can't feel if something's wrong in your body. Your body kind of tells you that something is wrong by suddenly raising the blood pressure. So autonomic dysreflexia is a state when something is wrong in your lower body. For example, you have a stone in your shoe, or you have a full bladder, or some other type of pain underneath your level of injury. Your blood pressure can suddenly start rising quite rapidly and get quite high, and this state can be dangerous. It's really unpleasant, but it can also get dangerous for the person. You start blushing.
You get a pounding headache often. I can feel it if I need to go to the bathroom. It's like you have to be your own sort of detective, because your body isn't really communicating with you. So you have to like, oh, something's wrong. What's happening now? Or am I sitting on my keys? You know, or something like that. It's a little bit like having a baby. You have to, if you have a little newborn, you don't know if they cry, you don't know what's wrong. You have to, are they hungry? Maybe need diaper change, or do they need to sleep? You have to sort of guess. And having a body that doesn't really communicate with you is a little bit of the same like having a baby. You'll have to like look, because the brain and nerves aren't working. You have to be very much more aware and think for your body.
So living with those kind of consequences of a spinal cord injury can make it quite hard to believe that this body that works okay, not really very well, will be able to create or like have a child growing inside it, and that a pregnancy will go well and that there won't be any long-term complications. Because pretty much every woman that goes through a pregnancy complains about all those things that are hurting and that the body is heavy, and you read all those newspaper articles about how important it is to train your
pelvic floor.
Exactly, your pelvic floor muscles. And then you think, okay, but I don't even feel my pelvic floor muscles. How will I be incontinent for the rest of my life if I go through a pregnancy?
And the thing is, when you have a spinal cord injury, it takes a couple of years, and then you learn to live with your disability. And then when you feel like, oh, I'm okay now, I can do this, you know, and then you think, am I really going to go through this? Or this is what we heard from women. Is it worthwhile, or is it going to work? Now I'm independent with my body, and I will become, putting on it 20 kilo will make life very hard.
And actually, a couple of some women we've been talking to and meeting, they say, no, that doesn't feel okay. I've finally found a level of independence that is okay. I'm not going through a pregnancy. I'll get a dog instead. That's a lot safer. And it sounds kind of funny, but it's true. And that is kind of sad.
Just a few short words about the female fertility, as we mentioned, is unaffected. If you the first 5-6 months after an accident, you will not have your menstruation, your menses maybe, because of the body's in shock, but after that it's unaffected. But when it comes to men, it's much harder to become a parent normal way, even though nowadays almost all men that have spinal cord injuries who want to become father can, thanks to IVF and other.
Yes.
Yes.
So the reason why the male fertility is affected is that the erection ability is lower. A lot of men have problems with ejaculation as well. In the ejaculate, there is a decreased sperm count, and the quantity of viable sperms, the sperms that are in the ejaculate, are of worse quality and less quantity of them as well. But as Erika said, with today's treatments, there is a big, or the possibility to become a father with a spinal cord injury is about as good as the possibility to become a father living without a spinal cord injury with the help of medical treatment.
And many men can become fathers at home too, using like a vibrator, a very strong vibrator, so they don't even have to go to the hospital. So the first thing we tell the dads is buy or have a lend of something. It's called a Ferticare vibrator. It's really strong vibrations, and if they use that, and they can have sex the normal way home without having going to the hospital, and many can become dads that way. It's just that you need stronger vibration to have a good ejaculation.
So, as we said, the female fertility is unaffected, but there are several issues that can make it quite hard to think about becoming pregnant. And there are some things that you should think about before becoming pregnant. We recommend pre-conceptional counseling, so the woman knows what to expect out of pregnancy before she gets pregnant, and to look over some things beforehand. For example, a lot of women with spinal cord injuries take quite heavy medication against pain. A lot of people have problem with neuropathic pain, for bladder relaxation and for spasticity relaxation. And those medications quite often aren't suitable to take when going through pregnancy. But on the other hand, some women that take this medication can't even think about going through a day without their pain medication. The idea of going through, best case, 40 weeks of pregnancy without the medication, but it can also take quite a while before you get pregnant. That is just unthought of. And the woman can need support in order to find medication that is better, or to get off the medication before pregnancy. And in some cases, you need to take into account how big is the risk for the baby contra how will the well-being of the mother be over the pregnancy. And perhaps there are medications that are better, or just the thought of having the pain medication that would help those days when the pain is its worst in the cabinet at home can help. A lot of women also have concerns about what the SCI body can manage, the spinal cord injured body can manage. As I said, I had a lot of thoughts about those pelvic floor muscles, and what would that mean for my bladder in the long run. Would I be less continent after pregnancy? Would I have problems in this area if I would decide to go through a pregnancy? And a lot of women also have thoughts about the possibility to be an independent parent. And we do need support beforehand. We need to see others, to talk with others, but also get the medical information beforehand. What will a pregnancy mean for me?
I remember being worried that because I was sitting all the time in the stomach, and if I would lean forward, and how would the baby sort of be affected? I was thinking it was going to be like squashed in there. But I had a really good someone to explain that the baby takes the room it needs, but all those thoughts go through your head, and it's really good to speak to others on beforehand.
And what we've also seen, and that what we really want to give you today, is that in most of cases the pregnancies go very well. Most women with quite difficult disabilities can become mothers, and it's quite amazing what the human body can manage. There are some red flags and there are some things to look out for, but those are quite minor things, and the babies do very well. In the cases where there are problems, it's normally the mother that suffers a little, but not, the things are quite minor.
So this is a picture of Nora and her family, and we mentioned before red flags. There are a few things that has to do with a spinal cord injury which you still should look out for, because when it comes to, for example, urinary tract infection, you as midwives know that you want to avoid that during pregnancy, but then many women with spinal cord injuries use catheters to go to the toilet or have, because of the neurogenic bladder, so they are in risk as it is for these kind of UTIs. So sometimes it's recommended that you take antibiotics in preventative.
Did you take
and that
a
you
low
check earlier or more frequent to check up?
Yeah, and that you get checkups that you don't have a urinary tract infection more often during the pregnancy than a regular woman, because it's more often so that women with spinal cord injuries get urinary tract infections. A lot of women with spinal cord injuries also have neurogenic bowel and can have problems with their bowel management during the pregnancy. Other women as well quite often have problems with the bowels, and that the stomach is really slow. And when you have a spinal cord injury and you're pregnant, this can become a problem. And then you think, okay, so you don't go to the toilet as often, but this can become quite big problem for women with spinal cord injuries, and it can also start this autonomic dysreflexia if you have too much problems with the bowel management. Then also women with spinal cord injuries run a bigger risk of having low blood count, having a low blood count, and it's you see this more often amongst women with spinal cord injuries than the rest of the population. And that's also a problem, because taking iron supplements, if you have troubles with your bowels, isn't always a good combination, as the stomach stops completely then. And in some cases, you might need to take extra iron intravenously, so you don't eat tablets, but get it straight into the blood instead.
And then with knee thrombosis, there is a high risk for deep vein thrombosis. You sit still, you're paralyzed, and then maybe you have swelling. So depending on if you have a history, we have learned that some people also will have injections, or that you have to look out. You should be aware of this, that there might be a higher risk. And then, once again, autonomic dysreflexia, that you can feel this high blood pressure, pounding headache, and blushing as you have contractions or as your stomach grows. So these are things to just be aware of. And then, of course, your body changes. You might not fit into your wheelchair anymore. Maybe you need a new cushion. You have maybe, I put on 18 kilos, and it's quite a lot. And if you have, if you sit still, there is a risk for pressure wounds. If you don't feel, you need to move around in your chair and be very observant. You don't want this during pregnancy. So you should look over your technical aids you have at home, your cushion, your wheelchair, if you now use a wheelchair. And it's much. I remember I couldn't. I stopped sitting on the couch when I was 7 months pregnant, because I just couldn't get up because I was so heavy and the stomach was in the way. So I remember I didn't take a shower when I was on my own. I was just so heavy in one position that it made all the transfers so hard. When you have very limited mobility, or I only use my arms and my head because I have no trunk or legs. So I have to lean. When I do a transfer, I do like this. I lean forward and I use, like I use my body to move. And then with this big stomach, I sort of had to stop doing certain things, even though I still drove a car, I think, almost all the time.
Yeah, and I have quite good muscle strength in my upper body, but even I use the transfer board to get in and out of the car, for example, because I got contractions when I did just something that when I tensed my muscles just a little, I got a contraction, and when I got a contraction, my entire body changed. I got spastic, so I used the transfer board quite a lot in order to do those things. Also, weight gain can be quite a problem because you get heavy during the pregnancy, but then you need to lose the weight again. And me having a spinal cord injury, I have 25%. I use 25% less energy. So if I gain weight, it's quite hard to lose it. And if you gain 18 kilos, and it's not just water, you need to lose that afterwards, and that can be quite hard. And it decreases your mobility quite a lot. Then if you have a higher spinal cord injury and the stomach grows, you can get troubles breathing. A lot of women who are pregnant get problems breathing at the end of the pregnancy and get short of breath at the end of the pregnancy. But if you have less lung capacity, that gets even a bigger problem. And for some women, it can be so hard that you even need to breathe some extra oxygen overnight. So, we're in a room full of midwives. What do you think if you have a spinal cord injury? Would you say vaginal delivery or cesarean section? Can we make a little? How many say vaginal delivery? Hands up.
Vagina.
I see about 10 hands. And how many would recommend a cesarean section? Okay, I would say that cesarean section lost the referral. What do you say?
But it was very hard for me to understand when I went to the obstetrician and she said, you will actually be able to give birth the normal way. And I'm saying, but I can't, I can't push, I don't have stomach muscle. How can it be possible? Because I know from women that I've spoken to how hard work it is, and how much. And I'm saying, isn't it safer if I have a cesarean? But as Carmel and colleague mentioned earlier, you want to avoid it if it's possible, because it is big surgery and the body recovers better if you give birth vaginal. Is that the word? So I was recommended, and I've had both my sons that way, and that has worked fine. And the obstetrician that is our mentor sort of in our program, she says, from what she sees, it's often that it's the childbirth, it's a bit quicker, but it goes very well. And one thing that you can't sort of do is you can't, if you don't feel the pain, you don't work against your body, you don't tense, or how to say, because as you all know, the uterus it is, you can't, none of you can move the muscles, because it's not a central nerve system that has the inner organs. So, I mean, you can't do much either. So if you have a good labor, childbirth ongoing, the body will do pretty much of the work itself. And as Karin Pettersson, the obstetrician that we have spoken a lot to, has told us, she has actually been in the room where two women that were in a coma gave birth to babies without any help, which sounds absolutely unbelievable. But the body is really fantastic. So I mean, still you would think, how do you even know when you're when it's going to happen? How do you prepare? And I think it's very important to have a good contact with your midwife before and talk about it, and that there's also more frequent checkups from maybe week 28 or so.
And this is also a thing that a lot of women with spinal cord injuries are terrified of, and a thing that also the healthcare professional around them are terrified of. Will the woman know when it's time for labor? And because of this fear, a lot of the women feel that it's safer to plan a C-section, because then they think that everything is under control. And you need to take this fear for real. But no one goes through a delivery or a childbirth without realizing that it's something going on, and you need to give the woman the signs of what's going on. The woman needs to learn her body, what happens when the contraction starts, how does the uterus react. But there are also other signs, like, for example, sometimes Erika told you that she got short of breath when she had contractions. Your heart rate goes up a little. You have you can get small signs of autonomic dysreflexia, that the blood pressure suddenly rises. There are other signs like that. There are some studies that show that women with spinal cord injuries more often have premature delivery, but the studies aren't really consequent there. One reason that might be the reason why some of the children are born earlier is that there are a lot of problems with urinary tract infections, and that those can start delivery a little bit earlier. But also because a lot of the pregnancies are ended earlier because of planned C-section, so that can change the statistics as well. What we have seen is that most of the pregnancies and childbirth goes really, really well. What's also important is that to give pain management to women, although they might not have any sensation at all. You think that, okay, this woman doesn't have any sensation on the chest level, so why do we need to give her pain management? But giving pain management, you reduce the risk of autonomic dysreflexia. So if you have a high leisure, it's really important to give anesthesia to her as well. And this is also something that you should look into before the labor starts, to be sure that you can give anesthesia to this woman and that it's safe, and that the anesthesiologists know how to give it to this woman. The effects on the lungs can be a reason to choose to give a cesarean section, to give a C-section to a woman with a higher leisure, because it can get quite hard to breathe at the end of the pregnancy, and also during labor it can be hard to breathe, and therefore some women can need to breathe oxygen during labor as well. A question that I've gotten quite often talking to midwives is, so what labor position is to recommend to a woman with spinal cord injury? And my answer is, you need to try around to think kind of out of the box and dare to try different labor positions, although it's a woman with a disability. We've seen that giving birth in
gynecology chair for gynecology. You were talking Table stool, yeah.
Exactly. Giving birth in table stool can reduce spasticity.
I don't, gynstol föder man inte i. But
Okay.
bed with the legs up.
Exactly. Can't hear you. But in one of those beds when you have your legs up, that can reduce spasticity, and that it's can be relaxing for the woman. But what we've also seen is that it is a risk of getting a pressure sore during labor, that it's important to change to different positions, not to get too still, because you're so focused on that the woman is in labor, and the labor can go on for hours and hours, and you can't be in the exactly same position for the entire time, because that is a big risk of a pressure sore, and you really don't want the pressure sore the first weeks after getting a child.
And pressure sores, as we said, unfortunately we've seen that in a few women that they've got their pressure wounds or pressure sores in hospital because and some women have been so, you have this newborn baby and you're so focused in breastfeeding and you might forget your own body and you focus so much on finding the baby's going to find a good grab on the nipple, and you sit really still for 45 minutes. So we really try to talk to the women that we meet that they should be really observant also after they've had the baby, because being in bed rest 3 months after you just had a baby is not something you want to go through.
And that is also something that midwives don't tend to be aware of, because you don't meet people that are high risk paralyzed or are in high risk of pressure sores. And as a woman, you're so focused on the new little baby. We've also seen that it's more common with anemia amongst women with spinal cord injuries during the postpartum period, but we don't really know why here.
And then in some studies we've seen from the States, they talk about there's a high risk of depression after. Not something that we've seen from studies in Sweden or so, but they mention it in American studies. And then breastfeeding?
When it comes to breastfeeding, there are women also with higher leisures can breastfeed, but there are some signs showing that if you have a leisure above T6, which means that you don't have full sensation in your nipples, this can affect breastfeeding. Right now there is a study going on in collaboration between Canada and Sweden amongst women who have given birth to children and have spinal cord injuries, in order to see if there is, how big problem this actually is and what can be done about it. So if you meet a woman with a leisure above T6, encourage her to breastfeed, but be aware of that there can be difficulties and that she might need some extra support.
I can say to myself, because I have the high lesion and I tried to breastfeed very hard. I really wanted to breastfeed my first son, but it was a real struggle. And I was breastfeeding, I felt like 24/7, and I had him hanging on all the time. But I was thinking to myself already at that time, mustn't there be a problem because I don't have full sensation? And you read that the sensation around the nipple is what sends signal to the brain. So I was trying really hard, but with my second child I sort of gave it up earlier and went to the bottle instead, because I just didn't have the time to breastfeed all the time, because he never seemed to get full. And I think that it was because of my spinal cord injury. And now I'm happy to hear, there's some research going on that's trying to explain why. That is the point.
What is important, though, is to give all women, independent of what disability they have, encouragement to breastfeed and also support. And it can be quite hard to find a position that works well if you don't have full strength in your upper body, because and to find a position that works. A lot of women find it useful to use a cushion, one of those bigger cushions, in order to find a good position, and that so they can breastfeed in a relaxed position. Some women find it easier to lay down on their side breastfeeding. And what I'm trying to say is that you need to encourage to try different positions and to find a position that works for you. I remember myself that when I was in the hospital, the midwife there, or the midwives there, they all had very strong opinions about breastfeeding, and the midwives I met were really thinking that laying down on my side would be the best position to breastfeed for me, and I struggled a lot. And then finally there was no midwife there, and I sat up, tried to breastfeed, and that was a lot better position for me. But this is so individual, and what I'm trying to say is that you need the support. And also that there are different aids. Some women find it really good to use one of those scarves to help to hold the baby, or to lean back. And there are different aids that you can use, and it's important to try them out. In this study about breastfeeding, we've also seen that there are sometimes problems with autonomic dysreflexia when the baby latches and the milk starts flowing. And also, if you have problems with sores on the nipples, that this can start autonomic dysreflexia. So it can be a problem.
And I think we have a last slide now for this morning's presentation, and we tried to sort of put together what we wanted to say here, really, that even if you have a spinal cord injury, that women with all level of injuries can have children, and even if it is difficult or there is some red flags, or we try to say that the positive aspects sort of outweigh the difficulties, and as long as you're aware, and that we try to encourage women to get in touch with other women to get sort of support.
If you look at the picture here, this is Annika. It's a woman with a quite high leisure.
She has a high neck injury.
So she can't move her hands at all. She can't roll her wheelchair on her own. But she is a fantastic mother taking care of Eric, that you see in the picture here. And I, for example, I've been at home with my 2 children now, alone, a year at a time, taking care of them on maternal leave. And although there are things that I kind of look out for, that I don't give myself into, I don't feel that I feel that I am an independent mother. All the worries I had beforehand, they didn't.
Good parenting has not really so much to do with the ability to walk and stand and run. Even though I miss running around with my kids, I would love to go skiing and do all those things with them. But I can hopefully give them other bits and pieces.
But the question is, would you have skied with your kids if you didn't have your spinal cord injury?
I think I would have. I did a lot of skiing growing up, but I do other things. And yeah, this afternoon we're going to talk a little bit more about tips and tricks and best advice for practical challenges in the everyday life of being a person, being a mum or a dad with a disability, using a wheelchair or similar.
And also, as a midwife, meeting a person with a disability, I would like to encourage you to ask questions, have a dialogue with the person about what they think can be obstacles and what you think can be obstacles and how you can overcome them. Encourage women with different disabilities to have children. Have an open-minded attitude to it also when you meet women who haven't really started thinking about having children yet. I wish that my rehabilitation doctor or the midwives that I met to get contraceptives when I was 24, 25, that they actually had raised the subject on, okay, so what would a pregnancy mean for you? Where can you find information? And give this information to women, although they're not at the stage of planning a pregnancy, and support them.
Okay, I think it's all for now. I don't know if we open up for questions or whether we take them in the afternoon.
Okay, we actually have 10 more minutes before lunch. So we have almost 10 more minutes for asking questions. So you have a great opportunity before the lunch break to ask Erica, Nora, whatever you're interested in. No, she has to use a microphone. I'm sorry. Please tell her to use a microphone because we cannot interpret.
Do you need to use the microphone?
Thank you.
The purpose of saying that we need the microphone.
Thank you very much.
Please.
Did you felt your baby during the pregnancy? The movements?
Yes, I did definitely feel my baby during the pregnancy. I'm hearing myself. Sorry. The movements and the contractions, I felt that quite early on. Did you feel your baby?
Yes, I did. I can't compare to what I would have felt otherwise, but also I feel like I always sort of had my hands on my stomach, and I probably couldn't feel it as much and as early, but then contractions and all that, yes, I did feel it, but probably not the same way I would have felt before.
I would say that with my first baby, I thought it was gases for quite a few weeks before I kind of realized that no, this was baby movements. With the second baby, I felt that it was movements quite a lot earlier, but I think that is common as well amongst women.
Još pitanja?
Any other questions?
You must have questions, don't you?
Everyone's hungry, maybe.
Did you have to push during the birth? Labor.
For my first son, when the water broke, that's how I sort of knew. I had contractions and I went in there, but it still took maybe almost a day before he was born. And I could sort of help when the midwife said that she wanted me to sort of lean a little bit forward. I couldn't push, I couldn't voluntarily think. And I can't use my muscles in my stomach, so I couldn't push the normal way. With my second child, when I came in, all was happening pretty fast. I was laying on my side, and I could hold on under my knees, and I could sort of push that way, help, like push the stomach. When she told me now, but that was, I was in hospital only for like 30 minutes before it happened very quick with number 2. So I sort of could help, but not the normal way with pushing.
Did you need any help pushing? Did you using claws or?
No, they didn't need any suction device or so. I know they had it prepared with the first, but I know the midwife pressed on my stomach with the first one, but no, it didn't need any sort of real help.
And my injury is kind of incomplete, so I have some muscle strength left, and it's also a lot lower than Erica's. So I can maybe push a little, and I didn't need any devices to help either. What I didn't feel during my labor was this urge to push during neither of the two childbirths. Instead, the midwife told me, okay, now Nora, now it's time to push. And I pushed because she said so. But everyone talks about this strong urge to start pushing, and I never felt that. So that was perhaps different. We do love questions, so go ahead.
Please, I'm a physiotherapist, and I want to know, did you have a treatment of physiotherapist during your pregnancy and after birth?
I didn't. I wish I had more contact with the physiotherapist before during my pregnancy. During my second pregnancy, I was more aware. Because I have an incomplete injury, I do have some muscles left in my legs. I can actually stand on my legs and take a couple of steps if I have crutches or can hold on to something. But during both my pregnancies, I had problems with pain in my hip. And the recommendation then is don't do things that hurt. But if you have less muscles from the beginning and then don't do those exercises or don't use those muscles for 6-8 months, then you lose the muscles again. And it took me, after both pregnancies, about 1.5 years before I could actually stand up on my legs again as I could before. So that is also something that is really important to keep on exercising during pregnancy in order not to lose muscle strength that you have.
And I didn't really have physiotherapy during my pregnancy or after. I tried to sort of stay fit by just moving around because you don't want to sort of lose all muscles, and also after I had given birth, I'd really try to get out and move around again, because you want to lose a bit of that weight and you want to stay active to feel better.
And also you do really need your muscles with the baby afterhand. And I now have a 1.5-year-old at home, and I can really feel in my shoulders that I have a 1.5-year-old at home, because there's a lot of lifting and carrying, and that takes a lot of muscles.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I have a question. Erika, you said that you breastfed partially, right? So I want to know if your colleague breastfed. If you did, what position did you find the best? How did you accommodate that need for breastfeeding? Thank you.
Yes, I did breastfeed. I found that the position that worked best for me was to sit in my wheelchair, mostly in my wheelchair, with a cushion under my arm and holding the baby pretty much like this. That worked the best for me. Sometimes I also sat with one leg over the other, because then I could kind of support the baby with my leg, and I could sit relaxed like that. During the nights, I breastfed laying down on my side, and what I found there was that I struggle with breastfeeding as well, although I have a lower leisure, and that is something I think we should keep in mind, that a lot of women struggle with breastfeeding. It's not always, the reason isn't always a spinal cord injury. But I did lay down on my side breastfeeding, and breastfeeding from both breasts, laying on the same side. I didn't switch sides. What I also found there is that it was really useful to have one of those cots that you can have on the side of the bed, so you can just drag the baby over to you and then put it back in the cot. So you don't have to get up in the wheelchair during night to get the baby up. Was that an answer?